filth, puny earth transmission. Huh? Hello? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm well aware that the last thing any one of you wants is a post-mortem of the wrong heroes travails, so that's exactly what I intend to give to you, if you'll just wait a minute. By the way, I should let you know, just as a matter of common courtesy, that the title of this presentation is Social Control. Now, I know that you don't want to discuss election post-mortems any more than I do, but unfortunately, I think that in order to fit into the theme of social control, we must first devote a little of our time to such a discussion. Now, first and foremost, I would like to mention that I am a librarian in my secret identity, and so, without much further ado, I'd like to present the results of a debate that we had on whether or not a master's degree is necessary to be a librarian. I think first I'd like to outline the affirmative case and review some of the main points made by the affirmative. Well, first of all, the affirmative states that librarianship is a profession. However, the distinguished Pierce Butler, writing in Library Quarterly number 21, volume 21, number 4, states, librarianship is not a profession. There are no abstract principles. There are no theoretical guides. It does not require lengthy training. There is no learning to resist personal interest, which I think has to do with the ethics of librarianship. Librarians aren't tempted by large sums of money to violate their ethics. Or at least not the ones I know. If you know of any, please let me know. I'd like to make their acquaintance. Now, Donald J. Sager, the city librarian of Milwaukee, makes an interesting point, which also serves to refute one of the points made by the first affirmative. There are more self-educated librarians in smaller public libraries where they are often awarded professional status through experience rather than training. Now, people in smaller public libraries tend to be more one-on-one with the patrons. It's less impersonal than a large city library, which may serve as many as 100,000 patrons per year. You would think that you would want an MLS degree more in such a circumstance, not less, and yet Donald J. Sager, at which point the tape ran out, which of course is just par for the course. However, I will attempt to continue this discussion by mentioning that, yes indeed, it has been said by Donald J. Sager, the city librarian of Milwaukee, that more self-educated librarians are in smaller public libraries. And yet, only 5% of public libraries service 100,000 people or more. Of course, of those, all of them had MLS library degrees. Now, I'd like to also mention the results of a study by Lynch and Lance in Public Libraries number 32. In fact, that's where I got that figure of 5%. 41% of all public libraries had an MLS librarian. 95% of all public libraries had a full-time person called a librarian. 60% of public libraries serve less than 10,000 people. Of those, only 34% of them are MLS librarians. So that means that nearly 2/3 of public libraries serving less than 10,000 people have MLS librarians. So, in Pauline Wilson, Stereotype and Status, Ms. Wilson adds that employers in academic and public libraries say that 75 to 85% of the positions in their libraries do not require an MLS degree. Pauline Wilson also goes on to state, it is essential to guard against exclusivity and qualifications which are not directly related to the duties of the position. Finally, Hanks and Schmidt in College and Research Library says that a BA with some undergraduate library courses is enough for basic cataloging, reference, and other fundamental positions in the library. And so I think that outlines the affirmative case and refutes it. Now I'd like to reply in the negative case outline showing conflicts with the conservative and points which have been unrefuted by the affirmative. Now, if librarianship, and I'm going to quote from the literature throughout, if librarianship is a discipline and a profession, why are universities so reluctant to give librarians the commensurate respect given to faculty members? Library Journal. In the future, changes in libraries may render the MLS obsolete. Library Journal. In fact, in the library of the future, information specialists may supersede librarians. Library Journal. Elizabeth Malia, in Library Mosaics, who is an MLS degree holder in a non-professional position, states that librarianship is more an attitude of professionalism and less a matter of credentials. In the same issue of Library Mosaics, Terry Jean Day talks about support staff increasingly taking on work which was formerly exclusively that of an MLS degree holder. 16% do interlibrary loan. That, of course, includes me because I do interlibrary loan. 26% do cataloging and acquisitions. And 31% do some reference work. Now, at this point, I would like to extend, well, first establish and then extend the negative case. And to do so, I'm going to commit not the fallacy of authority, which would be something like, Socrates says you do not need an MLS, therefore, and Socrates is a wise man, therefore you do not need an MLS. You know, I'm going to commit the fallacy of authorities and quote from Library Quarterly exclusively. According to my survey of the last 55 years or so of Library Quarterly, library schools tend to recruit people who are already interested in books, library, and learning. Therefore, library schools are merely preaching to the converted. Library Quarterly. Administrative staff may require a degree, but technical personnel can learn on the job. Library Quarterly. Or attend seminars. Library Quarterly. Experience is a more important thing to have than credentials. Library Quarterly. In academia, a polymath, that is, a learned person with some library training, is better than an MLS with an inadequate general education. Library Quarterly. The credo in academia seems to be, choose the scholar because it's easier to add technical training to scholarship than to add scholarship to technical training. Library Quarterly. Why can't the ethics of librarianship be absorbed on the job? Library Quarterly. If we can call a library school graduate a professional, how can we though? If they need at least a year's experience working in a library to assume that mantle. Let me quickly summarize the rest of my arguments. Is not an MLS merely a work permit? Library Quarterly. Is the librarian a professional or merely someone with a professional skill? Library Quarterly. Just because librarians may see themselves as a profession does not automatically confer that distinction upon them. Library Quarterly. Many enter the field with years of experience. Do they need a credential to advance? Library Quarterly. Few outside the profession even know the difference between a librarian and a lawn librarian. Now, if you take your pet to the veterinarian who got his degree from a matchbook, you would know the difference. Toots sweet once the doggy bit off part of his arm. But if you go into a library and talk to a non-MLS degree-holding librarian, are you going to know the difference? Chances are no, even if you're a librarian yourself. There is, perhaps, no profession or field of study less rooted in a coherent discipline. Library Quarterly. Finally, Professor Carson says that the median salary of a librarian, of a 1995 library school graduate, is 24, 26,000. I'm sorry, $26,016.15. But he didn't add that part. So, as A. Bookstein in the Library Quarterly, number 56, volume 56, number 4, pages 360 to 69 states, if the degree is so necessary, then why aren't librarians paid better? So, now, to summarize, John V. Richardson in Library Quarterly number 62, volume 62, number 1, pages 55 through 89, lists 6 important traits of the librarian: imagination, judgment, memory, perseverance, speed, and lastly, professional knowledge. Only the last can be taught, and as we all know, experience is the best teacher. Now, training in this could be gotten through seminars, meetings, and conferences. Therefore, it is not necessarily the case that a professional librarian should have an MLS, even less the case that a professional librarian must have an MLS. Please hold your applause until everybody gets a chance to speak. Actually, that was the last negative, so I guess it's okay if you applaud. And of course, I ran way over. Actually, I was only about 1 minute over. So, and because I mentioned the professor and cited one of his published works, I got a break on that score. So, anyway, that's the results of a little debate we did. Just to let you know that my forensic skills have not eroded in the approximately 23 or 4 years since I last practiced debate tactics, other than a brief stint in 1979, in which I spoke extempore for half an hour. Gee, that's a pretty hard thing to do, about whether or not we will ever encounter outer space aliens. And no, actually, I think it was more, well, I think that one was one of them, and the other one was, is proletarian culture a contradiction in terms? Should I get on the exercycle and make an annoying noise while I do the remainder of my presentation? Wow, my heart really is starting to pump more rapidly here. Whoa, I'm going 21 miles an hour. I'm going so fast that I almost ripped my legs out of their sockets. Wow. That's rough. Well, I'm really starting to get the hang of this now. You know, it's really too bad. I've only got, what, until 12:30. I got so much to do. I got to toss the laundry in. If I leave this thing for an hour's duration now, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the thing will work or not. Let's see, I got to run to the post office, buy some stamps, drop off the mail. Oh, wait a minute now. Let's see. How do I do this? First, I put the laundry in. Then, I go to the post office and drop the letters off. Then I swing back. But in the interim, the wash will still be in the laundry. I mean, the laundry will still be in the washing machine. Because it's not going to take me half an hour to get to the post office and back. So I got to try to think of something to do that will take up half an hour, but no more. Well, I could go to the market, but that would probably take more than half an hour. I don't want to go to the market that's closest to the post office because there was a rather embarrassing scene, also indicative of social control, that which is the theme of today's presentation. Gee, I'm kind of embarrassed to go back into that place, at least on the very next day. I have this scheme where I get these triple coupons and use them to do my shopping. Now, you know, regularly, most markets offer double coupons, but that's not such a big deal. Very few coupons are, you know, the 10-cent coupons for the 50-cent stuff, those are going out of fashion. You only really see those with paper towels. Basically, it's usually, and you know, 15-cent coupons for vinegar you might see, but most of the coupons are 25 cents and up. And it can go as high as $3, although they don't double them once they go past 99 cents. I did, however, find 97-cent coupons that Kellogg's was putting out to mark some sort of anniversary. Boy, I sure made out with a bandit with those. Once those were tripled, I was getting the stuff for free. They were giving me money to take it. But anyway, when I'm getting out with these triple coupons, and this is a long, convoluted way, and I think Johnny's Food Master or something like that hands those out, and those are well worth pursuing. I know that only Johnny's Food Masters take them up in Massachusetts, but down in Rhode Island, Stop and Shop is duty-bound to take competitors' coupons for some crazy reason, having to do with the triple coupon wars of 1992-93, which was one of the factors which bankrupted Almax for one, A&P for another, and there was a third store as well, which I used to go to all the time in Cranston, which also kind of went under. Not, I think, directly as a result of triple coupons, but they were one of the people who foolishly honored triple coupons, which, you know, that can make you broke. Anyway, I can go into a supermarket and buy $15 worth of groceries and end up paying $5 or $7 or $9 for them, depending on how shrewdly I've made my selections. And in many cases, these coupons are not for useless items, but for items which have high utility. Now, the coupons don't tend to come very fast and thick for things like peanut butter or even eggs, unless they're premium eggs, or milk, or other staples. But there are plenty of coupons for bread and yogurt and coffee and other things which perhaps are not absolute essentials, but which have taken the function of essentials in my household. So, I am saving an enormous amount of money. Other people might pay $2.89 for a can of Folgers coffee on sale. I only pay, about half that. I pay $1.40. See, we have what is known in the Wrong Heroes land as the President's Rules. The President's Rules state that you must pay no more than $3 a pound for meat. You must pay no more than 50 cents a can for tuna. And the way to do this and get your remarkable values is to exploit all of the weaknesses of the supermarket. Now, I'm not advocating breaking the law in any way. By exploiting the weaknesses of the supermarket, you do what many people have suggested. You plan your weekly menu around the supermarket specials, take full advantage of all the sales, go to the damaged produce bin and pick up some damaged produce. It's cheap and easy, and you got your produce for the week. You know, and use the triple coupons if you can get them, if you can somehow figure out some way to do it. Anyway, this long story short, I went in there, and usually the checking people don't really know how to do triple coupons, and so they have to call somebody who's like the assistant manager over, which in this case they did. But then I went up to the courtesy desk because it didn't look right. I thought that somehow they had gypped me out of $1.70. However, they hadn't. They had simply neglected to subtract the value of the coupons from the order. Instead, they rang in negative $1 and negative 70 cents, which I did not see. So I was very embarrassed. And there's this fellow named Oliver who works at the store that I go to, which is near the post office. Why should I be embarrassed? It's my right, damn it, to dispute my bill, even if I'm totally in the wrong. And I wasn't obnoxious about it. I didn't say, I'll see you in hell, stock boy. No, I was very nice. So yes, what I'll do is I'll drop the laundry off, swing by the post office, go to the market. By the time I get back from the market, the clothes will be ready to be put in the dryer. Put the clothes in the dryer. Put the clothes in the dryer. And then bring the dog back there. And once I've come to pick up the clothing and it has fully dried, it might take 2 dryer loads. I got a lot of whites to wash. There's the phone. see who it is. Hello? Hello? Mr. Francis DiMenno, concerning? What's the APR? Did you send us the Citibank card application? Have I gotten an application in the mail? Okay, let me have a look at it, and if I decide I want to go with it, then I'll send it back in, okay? Thank you. Sure. Okay. Okay. That's a call from Citibank. Notice how I brushed that notice how I gave that pest the old brush off without being actually rude? Citibank, right? 6.9% APR, no annual fee. But the 6.9 APR is only for 6 months. After that, probably goes up to 18%. You know? I mean, that's crazy. You're paying 1.5% interest. Let's say your balance is $10,000, which is unlikely. But you could max out on your card and be paying, you know, interest on a $10,000 loan. You know how much 18% of $10,000 is? That's $1,800. Let's put it in terms that even you can understand. See, 18%, and if you divide that by 12, that's what, $150 a month just on interest on a $10,000 loan. $150 a month. How are you ever going to pay your principal off? You're not. You're going to keep paying interest and keep paying interest. In 5 years, you'll have paid the equivalent amount of the loan without having touched the principal. You'll have paid that just in interest. See, they snag you in with the 6.9% rate, but it's only good for 6 months. You figure, oh, I'll pay off all those bills in 6 months. Like hell you will. You never will. Look at me, I'm $4,000 in debt. This is just crazy talk, I'm telling you. It's crazy talk. And I got to pay interest equivalent to 2% of my balance, which I have to pay interest in the minimum amount of interest that I must pay. I have to pay 2% of the account balance every month, even though the interest rate is 5.9%. So I can pay the minimum every month and grow deeper and deeper in debt due to the interest, even at the low rate of 6.9%. Crazy talk, I'm telling you. Crazy talk. Now let's see, where was I getting? Oh yeah, that's right. So yeah, I'm going to swing by my girlfriend's parents' house, throw a load of whites in the laundry. That'll give me a chance to use up some of the detergent instead of the liquid detergent. See, everything's so complicated these days. You have to have 3 different types of detergent. One, powder detergent for whites that are washed in hot water. Because if you use powder detergent in cold or warm, it might not fully dissolve, and you got all this cakey crap all over your clothes, and then you put it in the dryer and it cakes up even more, and it might even leach some of the color out of some of the delicates. So you have to use liquid, non-bleach detergent for the delicates. You got to use liquid detergent with bleach for the colors, which are not delicates, and the towels, and you got to use the powder detergent or the liquid detergent with bleach, but that you don't want to waste that, so you use the powder detergent on the whites. Maybe throw in a little bit of whitener. Everything's so complicated. You can't. It used to be you could ruin your laundry by just throwing everything in one big washer and then tossing it all in one big dryer. But now there's like at least 6 different categories of laundry and 6 different ways to wash it. There's the white delicates. There's the colored delicates. There's the white permanent press. There's the colored permanent press. There's the white regular loads, and then there's the colored regular loads. And then within those, there are subclasses classifications that you have to keep in mind, or else you risk destroying expensive clothing, which, when you're in your 20s, say, you don't really care, or maybe you do care an exaggerated amount, depending on whether you're a clothes horse or not. But as you get older, you're more and more reluctant to spend money on inessentials like clothing. It's a struggle just to stay alive, damn it. You got to save for your future. As poet Robert Frost put it, provide, provide. Gee, I was going to get into the political stuff, but I might even be able to get away without having to do so. Nah, I'll do the political stuff. What we're talking here when we say political stuff is, it's like this, see? It's like this. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I'm telling you I don't have the actual source here. 33. Oh, I've been looking for number 30 all along. What I really need is number 29. That's the one that has the operative information. And I don't have it. Let's see. Wow, it's so hard keeping track of all this stuff. Do you have any idea? There it is, number 29, number 30. How am I doing this? Number 31. See, I have to enumerate my notebooks. And some of them are 70-page notebooks, and others are 140-page notebooks. And I'm on number 35 right now. But number 34 was a 140-page notebook. I mean, it was, so, in other words, number 34 was number 34 and number 35. So I'm really on number 36, but it's paginated as number 135. Believe me, you don't want to know. You just don't want to know. Anyway, this is sort of a dry run for the comedy course, which we will probably be doing as a 13-week seminar over the course of the summer. Yes, that's right. You heard it here first. The comedy course is coming back. The overwhelming response, one person, to the original 10-week comedy course that was discussed over the course of a couple of summers ago. Let's see if I have my book here and I can figure out a little bit about when that was and maybe gear it to the same. Oh yeah, here we go. Actually though, the comedy course was over a year ago, in 1996. That was the 10-week course, which ran from the 20th of September until the 23rd of April. So I'm a little bit on the late side when it concerns this comedy course, but nevertheless. Wow. Let's take a moment to try to figure out just how many programs the Wrong Hero has done. How many 2-hour programs? Well, some of them were only half-hour programs, and some of them were only 60-minute programs. But I'm hoping to be consistent and continue on with 2-hour programming, which is going to be difficult at best. Well, for our 125th show, we presented the Comic Necronomicon. Number 126 was Meet the Wife. Number 127 was The Big Book of Clichés. How I fondly remember that. Number 128 was No Ordinary Man. Number 129 was Peculiar Thinking. Number 130 was Coercive Harmony. So, everything after that, which was the 25th of March, the Amok sessions. That was number 130, I think. Let's see. Number 131. And Vigilante Consumer was 132. And Triumph of the Superego was 133. And last week's live presentation, Thoughtful Americans, was 134. And so this week we are presenting number 135 in a series entitled Social Control. Like you really needed to know that, right? Gee, when was Thoughtful Americans? I guess that was, does it really matter? Yeah, that was the 19th of April. Geez, and today's what? The 29th of April? Today's Wednesday, the 30th of April. By the way, yes. So, what's happening on the 30th of April? Cabaret of the Oddly Normal's on tonight. So, anyway, next week we'll be doing the long-awaited Strenuousness. And the week after that, a show trial. And the week after that, a rattle bag. And the week after that, Naked to Mine Enemies. So let's see, if one of these books covers approximately a 2-hour show, we're in Social Control, rattle bag, Naked to Mine Enemies, and then 610, 619, 624. I guess we'll start the comedy course in July, unless somehow I can drag my sorry ass to the point where I can actually do some good new work. Maybe this is the time to start thinking about what I'm going to call my next several shows. Yeah, this is like sort of like cleanup business here. Sorry to bore you. Yes. See, Social Control, Strenuousness, a show trial, a rattle bag, Naked to Mine Enemies. These next two we'll call the next two Negative Capability and Hopelessly Corrupt. How's that sound? Yes, I think that's good. That's what I'll call them, whether you like it or not. And that's good, because then this will be sort of part of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 week mini-series, as they call it. And I like these mini-series. In other words, 14 hours will actually, by now, 13 hours, or maybe a little less or more. 13 and a half hours about politics. Just what the public's been clamoring for. Yes. I don't have to put up with this abuse. Say? Yeah. All right, Muggsy. Say? Yeah. Wow. So, you think you're pretty smart, don't ya? Yeah. Yeah. You know, I could do this sitting on the toilet. Why do I have to sit here? I could sit anywhere and shout, but I won't. So, I guess what Bill Clinton's been engaged in is what they call defining deviancy down. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, of course, referred to this phenomena of defining deviancy down. basically, the more egregious crimes of the past are merely bagatelle to us jaded, crime-accustomed Americans. And so, the more egregious presidential blunders of the past are mere bagatelle since we are accustomed to a whole string of mediocre presidents. Like Truman was considered mediocre in his day, today he's a giant. Eisenhower and his somnolent administration were considered no big deal in the 50s, and today the 50s are remembered as a oasis of tranquility. Jack Kennedy was much criticized for his youthful blundering and inexperience. Today, he is virtually revered as a god. Lyndon B. Johnson, on the other hand, has not yet been rehabilitated. In fact, although most people don't like to say it, many consider him the worst president we've had in quite a while. Nixon, again, he did a lot of brilliant stuff, but many consider him the worst and most corrupt president of the last 50 years. Although I don't know, if you put Nixon and Johnson head to head on a corruptness contest, it would be difficult to ascertain exactly who should get grand prize. Gerald Ford, a mere caretaker. God. Jimmy Carter, more ineptitude. Ronald Reagan, don't get me started. George Bush, please. George Bush was kind of like Eisenhower. Ronald Reagan was kind of like the Frankenstein FDR. Take some of the body parts of FDR and graft them onto a movie actor and give him a negative polarity charge so he does the exact opposite. You're sort of like Bizarro Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a twisted, imperfect duplicate who does the exact opposite. Now, so Clinton, I don't know. I think he's probably the long-awaited second reincarnation of Harry Truman, somebody who was undervalued in his day, overvalued by subsequent historians, but perhaps many years down the road he will be thought as a pivotal figure, a transitional figure, neither all good nor all bad. After all, Nixon is the first post-Cold War president. And if Bush hadn't been such a lousy campaigner, there's no way that Clinton could have unseated an incumbent the way he did. And of course, if the economy hadn't taken a convenient downturn at just the point when the elections came up. There's a lot to be said for a parliamentary system in which elections can be called. However, the problem with that is politicians already spend too much of their time campaigning. There ought to be some quick and easy way to resolve this problem of money in politics. I don't know. Shoot the politicians at the end of 4 years. If they run for re-election, tell them that if they lose, they have to pay a substantial fine, which they do anyway. And if they win, I don't know. There's got to be some way to discourage people from running for the same office forever and ever. Well, term limits was one such solution. Theoretically, the politician would put all of his efforts into raising money prior to being elected, but then would govern efficiently and effectively once in office. But then, if you had term limits, what kind of sad sack bums would these political jobs attract? Well, I only want to do it because I can only have the job for 4 years, and then after that it's back to the unemployment line, I guess. See, that's the way cabinet members are appointed, with term limits. Their appointments are tied to the presidential term limits. And what a bunch of bozos we get in cabinets, right? I mean, they're just glorified temp workers, as Robert Reich puts it. It might be getting to sound a little bit like Rush Limbaugh. Well, I don't intend to. Would you vote for a president who was a Republican right up until 1992? I wouldn't. But what we basically voted for is a president who was a Democrat right up until 1992 and ran as a Democrat, but once elected began governing like a Republican. He's sort of a fluke, like Bill Weld. Bill Weld got into the governorship because the alternative was the Democrat John Silver, and people held their nose and voted for Weld, but it was a mighty close squeaker. Do you realize how close John Silver came to becoming governor of Massachusetts? And just imagine what havoc he would have wreaked. And it's amazing that Bill Weld was the liberal alternative to John Silver. That's just plain crazy, I'll tell you. So, the incredibly distinguished Michael Barone says that culture makes society. Well, in which case, culture controls society, does it not? I'm just annotating this here now. Yes, culture controls society. When Tickle Me Elmo is the hot toy of Christmas, it may have something to do with cultural control over society, but of course it's a feedback loop. It goes the other way around. Do you think Tickle Me Elmo would have been such a popular toy during the Bush administration? No. What was the popular toy during the Reagan administration? Cabbage Patch dolls. Ugly, damaged, yet somehow adorable. And now it's like Tickle Me Elmo. Jolly, kind of stupid, but essentially lovable. And so, it has a lot to do with who is president at this time. The central conservative wish is that of The central conservative wish is that it is culture, not politics, which determines the success of a society. The central liberal truth is that politics can change a culture and save it from itself. Daniel Patrick Moynihan. That is so important, I should repeat it. The central conservative wish is that it is culture, not politics, that determines the success of a society. The central liberal truth is that politics can change a culture and save it from itself. Well, for example, let's talk about environmental issues. They weren't even on the map, really, as recently as 1957, the year of my birth. But with Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in 1962, Ralph Nader's Unsafe at Any Speed, 1964, Earth Day, Gaylord Nelson, what a name, 1970, the revelations concerning the ozone layer, which began to start coming out in the mid-70s, but were confirmed, I believe, in the early 80s. And of course, CFCs and ozone layer and global warming and nuclear winter, and it's like these are all just little buttons, little keyboards on an environmental piano that you can play at your will and create a symphony of pessimism, or, if the case is warranted, optimism. Well, the rate of increase of the ozone hole is decreasing. Therefore, we have nothing to fear. Now, is the ozone hole actually shrinking? Some say it is. But it's still there, right? I mean, it's gone from increasing to slowing in its rate of increase to becoming stable to actually shrinking. But it's still there, and who knows if it will ever be completely gone. Of course, I'm sure there's been holes in the ozone layer in the past. They're just not telling us about it because they predate literate society. Here's something interesting. Will World War III be fought over fishing rights? I mean, it's Asia, it's the Pacific. Nobody's gonna squabble over the, I don't know though, I mean, it could be that the fishing rights in the Atlantic. A lot of wars have been fought over fishing rights in the past, just as a lot of wars have been fought over territorial ambitions, over religion, Lebensraum, you name it. Now it's interesting. The Germans specifically stated they needed living room. That's because they were part of a culture which was a part of a crowded culture. They sort of had, the reason the Germans were such a ruthlessly efficient killing machine was that they were hardy and resistant to disease, and at the same time they were weeded for intelligence. Well, because of the many the sort of militaristic culture from which they arose. So they had the best of both worlds. Primitive islanders will fight each other, and the most intelligent will survive. Europeans crowded in their tenements will basically survive if they are the most resistant to disease. And the Germans sort of had both of those cultures, and that's probably why they have been such a powerful engine of change for Europe over the past 1,000 years. But it's all changing. I think war will be less a means of making policy, and simple survival and resistance and immunity to diseases will become a paramount concern. And of course, the more crowded and overpopulated the planet gets, the more likely people are to contract those very diseases which threaten their continued survival. If I sound like I'm incredibly wise, I'm not. But keep it in mind. That's all I ask. Just bear it in mind. It irks me, says Larry Harmon, TV's bozo. It irks me, says Larry Harmon, when people use the character's name in a derogatory way. Isn't that great? Here's the phone. Hello? Hi, how you doing? Oh, not bad. Yep, sure am. I will, don't worry. Good idea. Yep, everything's already, I've already opened all the curtains. I'm sorry, I was half awake when you asked me to do that, and I was sort of not really responding to you, so don't think that I was questioning your judgment, because I wasn't. Okay? Love you. You are so pretty, man. Oh, it doesn't matter what you think. You don't have to look at you. I'm the one. I'm the one that has to look at you. And I say, the verdict is pretty. Guilty of being pretty in the first degree. I'm going to send you down the river. The sentence, life with me. You'll be on the chain gang, the ball and chain gang. Are you talking to your boyfriend? He doesn't usually make you laugh. Well, I'm feeling in a pretty humorous mood. I don't know why. What do you want for supper? What do we have in the freezer? I can pick up some chicken. Because I gotta swing by the market anyway. It's on the way to the post office in one quick trip. We'll see. We can always cut the fat away. I'll see what I can do. Okay? Maybe I can get some good stuff. Maybe even pre-cooked, or what? Oh, you won't be needing supper tomorrow night, huh? All right. Sounds good. I keep forgetting today's Wednesday. I keep thinking of it as Thursday for some reason. I gotta make a couple phone calls down to URI. Not right now, but soon. A bunch of URI numbers? Really? How much did those end up costing us? I thought we had a one-rate in-state deal. You did. When did you do that? Well, that's funny because when I called to switch the name of the phone bill, she said, "Do you want the same rate as you had before, the one rate?" And I said, "Yeah, whatever we had before." Okay, remind me to do that tomorrow. And I was supposed to do that. I was supposed to remind you of something which I neglected to remind you of. Do you remember what it was? It had something to do with work. Something you were supposed to bring to work, yeah. Okay. And I'll remember your coffee creamer. Alright? You know that one? Okay. Very good. Can do. Alright, I'll see you. Maybe I'll get two, one for you. Alright? Okay. Bye-bye. Well, that was a very pleasant conversation. Usually, we don't have pleasant conversations. Wow, it's getting late. Time is short and the water rises. You know, pretty soon I'm going to have to get up and actually take the dog back. And this is going a lot more slowly than I thought it would. I figured it would take me, this whole politics thing might end up taking an awful long time to finish completely. In which case, I've got my programming for the summer, don't I? Provided, of course. But I'm doing this for you! For you! It's not like I'm just doing it to hear the sound of my own voice, because I never watch these things. What, are you kidding? It's enough effort to actually do them, let alone to watch them. And, geez, I don't know. What can I say? What more can I say? What can you say about a girl who died? Her hair, that is. So, yes, Bozo says that he doesn't like people using his name in vain. How do you like that, huh? Isn't that a real gut slammer? It's never inappropriate to start your talk with the words, "I very much appreciate your coming here today." Or in other words, "Now I'd like to thank you all for kindly stopping in. You're sure invited back next week to this locality to have a heaping helping of our hospitality. Hillbillies, that is. Set a spell. Take your shoes off. Y'all come back now, here." Yep, it is never inappropriate to start your talk with the words, "I very much appreciate your coming here today." That is something to remember, isn't it? Well, remember, imagination is more important than knowledge. Albert Einstein said it, and therefore it must be true because he's the designated genius of the 20th century. Yes. Well, here's a joke. Hey, why don't you give a conversation piece to a monk who is constrained by a vow of silence and therefore would have no use for a conversation piece any more than a bald man would for a comb. Hey, Gramps, what happens when you give a bald man a comb? He'll never part with it. Google for Google Post. Anyway, yes. Hobbes, not Hobbes of Calvin and Hobbes, but Hobbes, the British writer and philosopher. Hobbes defines laughter as sudden glory. Take away the sudden impact, and there's precious little glory left. Now, here's something interesting. It's not really directly bearing on the point of the sermon, but nevertheless, here it is. The only useful thing I have learned from dozens of job interviews is that people are not really interested in other people. They don't listen to them. You may think that your husband or wife or friends listen to you, but in fact they are just listening for a gap in the conversation to tell you something about themselves. This has two consequences. One is that you can talk absolute rubbish and no one will notice as long as you deliver your rubbish with deliberation and authority. The second is that if you come out with something truly arresting, there is a small chance they will remember you and at least give you another interview. Like if you start your talk out in a sort of monotone, well, yes, I'd like very much, you notice that I was punctual to getting here. It's because I don't have anything else to do with my life, and I'm basically a very boring person, but I do have one aptitude which I think would be of great benefit to your organization. I can do a really good impression of Bill Cosby. That's the only thing I can do. Yeah. And it's not even that good, but hey, it's a start, you know. I can do Jimmy Stewart too, kind of, and John Wayne. See, John Wayne, I got to work on the John Wayne. But you know, isn't that just so hackneyed? The John Wayne impressions, the Jimmy Cagney impressions. It's sort of like the kind of, I don't know. Was it ever original to do those types of impressions? Was there ever a time, maybe 1938, back when Cagney was peaking and Wayne was getting started, when it was okay to do those types of impressions? But ever since then, it's like every hack comedian. You got to wait until the last of the old-time comics dies out before you can bring those up again. Will that ever die out? I mean, do people do impressions of Napoleon, like celebrities from 200 years ago? You know, and now my impression of Isadora Duncan. No, a door is not a Duncan. It's a door. Is a door or is a door a Duncan? A door is a door, and I adore you. And I'd like to thank you all for coming out. It's like, oh, well, you're welcome. We feel a lot better about having come out now that you've properly shown your gratitude. Like the idea that the audience is a bunch of snobs. And, oh, really? How vulgar. These so-called jokes of yours are all trading upon sadism and cruelty, and we prefer much more refined sorts of humor. Can't you give us a little disquisition on your opinion of whether the modernists had profoundly influenced 20th century culture, or whether the modernists merely constitute a lapse or a gap in the continued progression of the post-romantic movement, which many acknowledge ended with World War I. Yes, the return of romanticism, that's coming soon. You just know it. Postmodernism is bleak and barren. The minimalist movement in art is an utter joke. I mean, it shouldn't have lasted as long as it did. It's a mere blip on the screen of culture. And the people who hated romanticism were probably longing for the day when it was replaced with something better. But they probably didn't anticipate that what it was going to be replaced by would last nearly as long as romanticism itself. Romanticism, I sort of, you know, talk about the burned over district. I mean, it lasted like 120 years. From I don't know, Wordsworth to Yeats, basically, is talking here. And then, you know, the modernist boys, the modernist crew came in, the lost generation. We're the lost generation! Huh! And yeah, why don't people do like literary raps? We're the lost generation! Huh! We're going to take your head in, stick it in a... I can't do this. I mean, I don't have any talent. I can't even think of a rhyme for generation. We're going to stick your head in some postmodernist speculation. No, don't start whimpering. I know I shouldn't sing. The dog doesn't like it when I sing. I'm going to give you the results of my speculation. We're the postmodern lost generation. So, yeah. So postmodernism has lasted about 80 years. I mean, modernism and its attendant postmodernism, 80, yeah, whoa. I mean, and you know, the little sub-movements are all just part of the big movement of modernism. You know, Picasso, Cubism. Of course, that all started, you know, in like 1906. The Ashcan School, the Armory Show. You know, I mean, there were things leading up to modernism, which began before the actual reign of modernism began occurring. Dada, Surrealism, and whatnot. But anyways, I was getting at the. Let's say that James Joyce was a, if not the, pivotal figure of modernism. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man was, in many respects, the first modernist book, and it had its one foot in the Romantic movement and one foot in modernism. Dubliners was basically a late Romantic work. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man had one foot in the Romantic movement and the modernist movement, and of course by the time we get to Ulysses, we've got a case of full-blown modernism on our hands, and strangely enough, Finnegan's Wake was the first postmodernist work. It took modernism to a type of degree that could never be excelled. It didn't have to make sense, although it did ultimately. If only we could have read the first or second draft of Finnegan's Wake. If only he had died before adding on and adding on and adding on. See, that's what postmodernism is all about. I don't create, I only add. And this is what I'm doing basically right now. I'm not really creating anything, I'm just adding. I guess this is like the late postmodernist movement. And pretty soon we're going to be getting to the next big thing. What's it going to be called? It's coming. It's got to come. It's got to come in the next 40 years or less. Maybe the post-literate movement. Well, you know, modernism, it sort of depends on fragmentation. Whereas the Romantic movement depended less on intellectualization and more on depth of feeling, modernism depends less on coherence and more on multiplicities of points of view. And so, the next thing to come along will probably depend less on literacy and more on multiplicities of means of communication. In other words, we're talking collage city here, okay? So, like Magister Ludi, which was Hermann Hesse's statement about modernism, the glass bead game. Each glass, in other words, a return to hieroglyphics. It's going to be tough being a pioneer in this field. Look at Picasso. came out with the first Cubist work, which I will refer to as Le Mademoiselle d'Avignon, even though I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly. He was reviled. Only a few recognized the work of genius that it was, repulsive as it was. Yes, it's tough to be a pioneer. Joseph McCarthy's idea of a meal is steak, very well done. Cremate it, he tells the waiter. Always for dinner, often for breakfast. This was quoted in Time magazine, 1956, I think. This is an example of, okay, anyway, this is an example of postmodernism. Just bringing this up at random. A romanticist would have found some way of integrating that into it, even if the circumlocucious means by which the information was worked into the narrative text was much longer than the actual factoid itself. Postmodernists feel under no such compunction to make their little random bits of information fit into a coherent sequence of narratives. Rather, they just plop it right down in there and say, the fact that I have selected to randomly and arbitrarily put this piece of information within this text is in itself a statement. The gaps of logic, that's what characterizes postmodernism. Gaps of logic. Whereas modernism is basically romanticism is less thought, more feeling. Modernism is less sequence, more random. Postmodernism, gaps of logic. Take the place of logic. Postmodernism, hieroglyphics. And that's appropriate because if China becomes a rising world power, and there's every reason to think that they will, they'll be on the cutting edge. Are not Chinese ideograms merely incredibly sophisticated hieroglyphics? So, back to politics, which of course, as we know, and as Daniel Patrick Moynihan has put it, it is culture, not politics, that determines the success of a society, according to the conservative Weltanschauung. However, liberals believe that politics can change a culture and save it from itself. Michael Barone says, culture makes society. The Wrong Hero says, culture controls society. Society controls culture. A continuous feedback loop. Wow. So, when we say that, or when George Will says that Jack Kemp, for example, verges on incoherent, he's basically using old-line political rhetoric. When Bob Dole compares his opponent to Bozo, he is unwittingly using the modernist style. So in other words, someone like George Will a rhetorician is a pre-romantic. Somebody like Bob Dole, not particularly good at rhetoric, and more in touch with his feelings in the romantic sense, but forced to rely upon advice of his handlers who tell him that he should throw in some contemporary references, or at least references to something vaguely contemporary from time to time so he doesn't lose his audience. And being the political animal that he was, he did so. Bob Dole leads with the gut, a classic romantic. So, but he's forced to use random intellectualization in a modernist or even postmodernist way in order to connect with his audience. Basically, modernism is irony. Postmodernism is post-irony, being ironic about the fact that you're ironic. And of course, this can lead to one of the central dilemmas of modernism, which I'll call, why bother? Samuel Beckett referred to it as, I may fail, but I'll fail better. It's all been done before. Why bother? In fact, the fact that it's all been done before has been expressed before. So why bother expressing it? In fact, and so forth and so on. Irony versus post-irony. So what we have to do is get to a point where we live in a pre-ironic society where everything is so doggone serious that nobody would even think of thinking of it in a pre-ironic fashion. What do you think? Should I try to finish this thing? Let's see. By the time I finish this, it'll be 12:30. Put the wash in. It'll take half an hour. And then 1 o'clock. 1 hour to dry all that laundry? I don't think so. Anyway, Jack Kemp, basically a passive-aggressive guy and the victim of a passive-aggressive GOP. We want someone who's a slick talker, but we don't really like him very much, so we're going to sabotage him every chance we get. Well, and just Bob Dole, the whole funeral march of the waning days of his campaign. Jay Leno, one of the reasons for Jay Leno's success and popularity, and for that matter, one of the reasons of the success and popularity of many political figures as rhetoricians in general, is that they know never to assume an audience knows who people are. So that's something to keep in mind if you ever decide to run for political office. Never assume that your audience knows who people are. In other words, radical clarity. The same movement in journalism refers to the notion that everything should be explained. Of course, this can get kind of inconvenient. Christmas Day, December 25th, a celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ, Hebrew scholar and Messiah, circa 2 A.D. to 35 A.D., comes but once a year, 365 days. Wow. I can really run with this. I think that will be the title of one of my pieces, so I don't forget about it as a possible comedic gimmick. Yes, radical clarity. That will be the title of the June 24th Wrong Hero presentation. God, now that I think of it, I've got to schedule my presentations at least 8 weeks in advance now. That's pretty rugged. I'm having a hard time keeping up with this grueling schedule. But this one's going particularly well. If they all went this well, I think I wouldn't have any problems at all. And I'd like to thank you all for kindly dropping in. Well, you know, it could have been worse, the election. I mean, Dole could have won, you know, he could have lost by some horrendous margin, like, I don't know, 38-62. That would have, like, really, as it was, he ran a respectable enough race so that the Democrats do not also control both houses of Congress. So, you know, you got to give Bob Dole credit. He wasn't Mr. Charisma, but then again, who was? Who else could have possibly beaten Bill Clinton? Lamar Alexander? It's like the Wendell Willkie FDR race of 1940. I mean, or even the Alf Landon FDR race of 36. Why vote for the Republican imitator when you can have the Democratic original? You know, nobody's ever really... The thing about Bill Clinton is nobody has ever bothered to imitate a Democratic president for a long time. And, you know, since Kennedy, you didn't see any LBJ imitators out there, did you? You've never seen any Jimmy Carter imitators. Bill Clinton has kept his distance from Jimmy Carter, you may have noticed. But there are Republicans who are bothering now to imitate Democrats. I can name at least two. One of them is a friend of mine from high school who was a congressman from Pennsylvania. Anyway, according to Hendrik Hertzberg, danger is always in the air when somebody decides he has nothing left to lose. Gee, didn't Bob Dylan say that? You ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose. I just wasted all your precious time. Don't think, oh, it's all right. Yes. Well, how interesting how Mr. Hertzberg also notes that in their speeches, the candidates made extensive use of a praetorio, the unctuous rhetorical trick of calling attention to a subject by taking credit for not calling attention to it. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him, etc., 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 is an example, perhaps the most famous one, of praetorio by William Shakespeare in Julius Caesar. More radical clarity here. Can you imagine the havoc you would wreak if, by attempting to be humorous, you utilize radical clarity in every single one of your pronouncements? Like, nice day, 24-hour interval, isn't it? Yes, I'm going to have to really look into that. Radical clarity. He made a lot of the same mistakes the president made. Overplayed his hand, spoke intemperately, got a little too stuck on himself. Well, she's talking, of course, about Bob Dole. In the book Political Animal by Doug McGrath, the author evokes nearly every stock character in American political life. Well, this looks like an interesting topic to examine, so let's discuss it. The industry spokesman, the candidate's peculiar relatives, the tobacco executive, the ripe young volunteer, the sanctimonious liberal who says, "Hello everybody, I'm a man, I'm white, and I'm sorry." I remember when I was a kid, Barefoot Sanders ran for the Senate against John Tower, and his slogan was, going barefoot. David Remnick, cited. So, more often than not, political speech is about the complete denial of reality. Again, we're talking about postmodernism here. We're talking about, that horrendous movement in academia where you talk about the text, shut up, okay, wait a minute. What's it called? Foucault, all that stuff. I'm starting to lose it. Decontextualization, decertification, what's it called? My blood sugar's getting low. I can't think. Anyway, it'll come to me. Political speech is about the complete denial of reality. It's about putting a happy face on dark situations. So the possibilities for comedy are endless. Politicians are funny the way parents are funny, because they're not supposed to be. Good point, Mr. Remnick. So, well. Bob Dole said, getting into the mud isn't my bag. Isn't that interesting that a 72-year-old man would use a term from the 1960s? Doesn't that kind of age us? So strange. So strange. What more can I say? Well, I guess I better get a move on. They say that Al Gore is superbly vice presidential, that he has a leaden, condescending delivery. He resembles an animatronic announcer. He carries the water. The train runs on time. He is utterly reliable, the soul of propriety, no public wildness in him. Although in private he has the cackle of a laugh that hints at an ironic sensibility. A vice presidential style in presidential politics, inherently conservative, inevitably disappointing. A vice president is by definition a member of the establishment, and Americans tend to fall for passionate, charismatic outsiders, especially in the TV age. The charismatic path to the presidency is to excite passions. The vice presidential path is to service constituencies, says Joe Klein. Well, you know something? I think Joe Klein, if he's trying to say that Al Gore is not our next president, I think Joe Klein is wrong. I think he will indeed be our next president. But I am no expert. Ah. Well, we'll pause a moment for station identification. The Wrong Hero is brought to you by Cruel and Unusual brand political rhetoric. When you want it to be effective, you want it to be cruel and unusual political rhetoric. Well, I made it like a bandit at the market. You'll forgive me if I gloat a little bit. Like I got, Green Giant oven roasters. I ended up paying $1 or something for it. I got like 4 jars of Coffee Mate. I had to do it right away because the coupon expired today, April 30th. Ended up getting those for 40 cents each, little ones. But usually will switch to camera mode. Now it says there's 5 minutes left. Boy, this is kooky. Is it kooky or what? If there really is only 5 minutes left, and of course there isn't, there's like 30 minutes left, just as I said earlier. Well, I don't know. Now it says 33 minutes. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to prolong this agony for you. I think rather than force you to endure 30 minutes of blank screen, because this camera's not working too well, I'm going to end this presentation. I'll wrap it up for now, but never fear, I'll be back. And when I am, it'll be with bells on. So, you know, in the 30 minutes that you would have spent watching this program, I suggest, that is, the wrong hero suggests, that you use that time to hug a friend, kiss a baby, or maybe make a killing on the stock market. It's up to you. I have no say in the matter. What you do with your time is your business, not mine. However, this is the wrong hero. This program has been one in a series of programs concerning politics in general, and the wrong hero's inimitable spin on politics in particular. And it's been called Social Control. Now, tune in next week, and we'll have a lot more for you. Sorry this has been so rushed, but, well, now I have an opportunity to make some coleslaw, which is good. Next week, tune in when the wrong hero presents Strenuousness. And this promises to be interesting because we'll be talking about events which have led up to the 1996 presidential election. I'm very happy that you all deigned to show up for this presentation, and I am the wrong hero. And please tune in next week on Cambridge Community Television, Channel 55, on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. as the wrong hero once again presents his slapdash presentations of his commentary on important political events. I'm glad you were all able to make it, and I hope at some future time you decide to videotape these things so that if it gets to the point where I have to destroy all these videotapes for whatever reason, there will still be some documentation floating out there somewhere in cyber world. Thank you all, and good night.